My 11-year-old daughter's best friend started behaving in a way that deeply worried me, until I discovered the reality of what she was going through. The most shocking part was realizing that her grandparents knew exactly what was happening and were doing absolutely nothing to help her. It wasn't something that happened overnight. At first, it was little things. Things so small that, if you're not paying attention, they simply go unnoticed. My daughter Sophia was 11 at the time. She had always been a quiet girl, the kind who prefers drawing or reading over making noise. She didn't have many friends, but the few she did have, they mattered. And among them, there was one in particular. Valentina. She came into her life at the beginning of the school year. I don't know exactly how they met, but within a few weeks they were inseparable. She came over often, they did homework together, watched movies, the usual. At first, I liked her. She was polite. Too polite, now that I think about it. One of those kids who says thank you and excuse me with an almost adult precision. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was something else. Something harder to explain. Valentina never fully relaxed. It didn't matter if they were playing, watching a show, or just talking. There was always a kind of tension in her, as if she were waiting for something, or someone. The first time it really struck me was one random afternoon. They were in the living room watching cartoons. I was in the kitchen, but I could hear them. Everything normal, laughter, comments, until suddenly it went quiet. A sharp silence. Not the comfortable kind. A cut-off one. I peeked in. Valentina was staring at the window, frozen, as if she had seen something. Everything okay? I asked. She took a moment to respond. 1 second. 2. Then she turned her head and smiled. Yes, but it wasn't a real smile. It was learned. Automatic. Sophia didn't even seem to notice. She just kept doing her thing like nothing had happened. I didn't say anything either. But something stayed with me. That same night, while we were having dinner, Sophia mentioned something that seemed unimportant, or at least it did at the time. Valentina can't stay at people's houses for long. Why? I asked. She says her grandparents don't let her. Does she live with her grandparents? Yes, I nodded. It didn't seem strange. Until Sophia added, but she doesn't like leaving either. She always asks what time it is. That made me look up. What do you mean? Sophia shrugged. I don't know, like she's afraid of being late. I didn't ask any more questions, but I started paying closer attention. From that point on, things started to fall into place, little by little. A few days later, Valentina came over again. That afternoon they were working on a school project. Everything seemed normal, until I heard a noise. Not loud, but enough to feel off. I went to check. The project was on the floor, one piece broken. Sophia looked surprised. Valentina, frozen. Literally. She didn't move. Didn't speak. She just stared at the mess like it was something far more serious than it really was. Hey, it's okay, nothing happened, I said. Sophia nodded quickly. Yeah, we'll glue it back. But Valentina didn't react. I stepped closer. Really, it's not a big deal. And then something happened that I didn't expect. Her eyes filled with tears. Not the quiet kind. It was immediate. Like she had crossed an invisible line. I'm sorry, she said it softly. Too softly. It's okay, I repeated. But she was already somewhere else. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, she kept repeating it, over and over. As if she wasn't talking to me. As if she were answering someone else. That's when I felt that first drop in my stomach. Because that wasn't a normal reaction. Not for a school project. Not for an accident. That came from somewhere else. From something deeper. I told her to calm down, that everything was fine. I gave her water. I spoke to her gently. After a few minutes, she came back. Like nothing had happened. She wiped her face. Smiled. That same smile again. Sorry. Sophia was already fixing the project. It's okay. And they continued. As if the moment before had never existed. But for me, it did. And it didn't leave. That night, when Sophia went to sleep, I stayed there thinking about what I had seen. It wasn't just nerves. It wasn't shyness. It was fear. And not just any kind of fear. It was the kind of fear that's learned. That's trained. That's repeated. The next day, I made a simple decision. I was going to meet her grandparents. Not out of curiosity. Out of necessity. Because something wasn't right. And it was starting to become too obvious to ignore. It wasn't hard to find an excuse. That same Friday, when Valentina came over, I casually told her that this time I'd be the one taking her home. That way I can meet your grandparents, I added, as if it were nothing. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough for me to notice. Okay, she said. Too quickly. Like she had made a decision she had already thought about before. During the drive, she barely spoke. Sophia was in the back, telling me something about school, but Valentina stayed quiet, staring out the window. Not with curiosity. With attention. As if she were watching. When we arrived, I understood why. The house was strange. Not on the outside. It was a normal house, even nice. A tidy garden, clean curtains, everything in order. But there was something in the air. A rigidity. As if everything was exactly where it should be, and nothing could move. Valentina unbuckled her seatbelt quickly. Thank you, she said. And before opening the door, she paused. Took a deep breath. Once. Twice. Then she got out. I stepped out of the car too. I'll just say hello, I told her. She didn't respond. She walked to the door. Knocked. 3 exact knocks. Not one more. Not one less. The door opened almost immediately. An older man. Tall. Thin. A cold gaze. Not angry. Cold. Good afternoon, I said. I smiled. He didn't. Good afternoon. His voice was dry. Valentina lowered her gaze. I'm home. She didn't say hi. She didn't say grandpa. Just that. I'm home. The man nodded. Looked at his watch. Literally. You're 2 minutes late. Silence. Valentina didn't respond. Didn't defend herself. Didn't explain. Nothing. I'm sorry. That phrase again. That same tone again. My body reacted before my mind. Actually, it was traffic, I said, trying to soften things. The man looked at me. Directly. Without changing his expression. I didn't ask. Silence. Uncomfortable. Heavy. Valentina took a step inside. I'm going to put my things away. The man stepped aside. Didn't say anything else. Didn't invite me in. Didn't thank me. Nothing. He just moved. Valentina went in. Disappeared down the hallway. I stayed at the door. Not really sure if I should say anything else, but it wasn't necessary. The message was clear. I wasn't welcome. Well, have a good afternoon, I said. He gave a slight nod, and closed the door. In my face. Not rudely, but without courtesy. Just, closed it. I went back to the car. Sophia looked at me from the back seat. What happened? Nothing, I said. But something had. A lot. The drive back was quiet. My mind wouldn't stop. That interaction wasn't normal. It wasn't strict. It was control. Pure. Cold. And the worst part, Valentina didn't seem surprised. She seemed used to it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the phrase, "You're 2 minutes late." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. As if 2 minutes were a serious offense. As if time wasn't time, but a rule. The next day, something happened that set off every alarm. It was Saturday. Sophia was in her room. I was in the living room when I heard the doorbell. I opened it. It was Valentina. Alone. Unannounced. That was already strange. But what chilled me was her face. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were red, like she had been holding a lot in. Is Sophia here? She asked. Her voice sounded normal. Too normal. Yes, come in. She walked in, went straight to Sophia's room, without taking off her shoes, without saying anything else. That wasn't normal either. They closed the door. A few minutes passed. Then, I heard something. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't an argument. It was a whisper, but an intense one, like they were talking about something serious, too serious for their age. I moved closer. Not to spy, just to make sure. And that's when I heard a sentence I still remember word for word. If they find out, it's going to be worse for me. I froze. My heart started beating faster. I didn't know exactly what they were talking about, but I knew one thing, that wasn't a child exaggerating. That was a child warning. I stepped away from the door. I didn't go in. I didn't interrupt. But in that moment, I had no more doubts. Something was happening in that house. Something that wasn't normal. And the most unsettling part was that Valentina wasn't asking for help. She was trying not to make things worse. And that's what people do when they've already learned that speaking up has consequences. That afternoon, when Valentina left, she didn't say much. She said goodbye quickly, like always. But before walking out, she did something different. She looked at me, directly, for the first time since I had met her. And in that look, there was no fear. There was something worse. There was resignation. As if she already knew no one was going to do anything. As if she had already accepted her situation. And that was what broke me. Because I understood something important. The problem wasn't just what she was going through. It was that she had been going through it for a while. And no one had stepped in. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay and watch. I wasn't going to wait and hope it might just be a phase. Because it wasn't. The next day, I was going to talk to the school. And if I had to, I was going to step into places I wasn't being invited. Because there was an 11-year-old girl living in fear. And that wasn't something you could ignore. I didn't wait until Monday. I dropped Sophia off at school and didn't leave. I asked to speak with the counselor. I didn't say everything. Not right away. Just enough for them to understand this wasn't just any concern. I'm worried about a student, I said. Her name is Valentina. The secretary looked up. Not surprised. That was the first thing that caught my attention. One moment, she said. She led me into an office. Small. Organized. Too organized. Minutes later, the counselor walked in. A woman in her 40s. Serious. But not cold. She sat across from me. Tell me. And I did. I didn't embellish anything. I told her about the project. About how she kept apologizing over and over. About the reaction to being 2 minutes late. About the phrase I heard, if they find out, it's going to be worse for me. When I finished, there was silence. But it wasn't the silence of surprise. It was the silence of confirmation. She looked down for a second. Then nodded. I understand. That word. I understand. Not that strange. Not that can't be. I understand. A chill ran down my spine. Did you already know? I asked. Pause. Not in detail, she replied. But there is a history. That's when everything started to take on a different shape. You're not the first person to notice unusual behaviors. My stomach dropped. And what have you done? It wasn't a gentle question. It couldn't be. She took a deep breath. We've tried speaking with the guardians. The grandparents? She nodded. Yes. And? Another pause. Longer. They are very closed off. That word wasn't enough. I knew it. She knew it too. They deny any problem. They say the girl is sensitive, that she exaggerates, that she needs discipline. Every phrase fit too perfectly with what I had seen. Have you done anything else? I pressed. Protocols were activated. That sounded good. In theory. And an initial evaluation was conducted, but no clear physical signs were found. That's when I understood the problem. There were no visible bruises, no marks, just behaviors, reactions, fear, and that's harder to prove. But that doesn't mean nothing is happening, I said. More a statement than a question. The counselor looked at me, directly. We know. And for the first time, I saw frustration on her face. But there are limits to what we can do without more concrete evidence. That's when I felt anger. Not at her. At the system. At the situation. At everything. So what are you waiting for? I asked. We can't wait for something worse to happen. Silence. Heavy. She didn't answer right away. Because there wasn't an easy answer. There never is. We are monitoring the situation, she finally said. And any additional information is important. That's when I understood my role. I wasn't just a bystander. Not anymore. I can talk to her, I said. Carefully. The counselor hesitated. I noticed. You can't pressure her. I won't. If she feels like someone is investigating, she might shut down. I knew that. I had already seen it. But I can't do nothing either, I replied. And that seemed to convince her. She nodded. If you do it, build it on trust. No direct questions. No confrontation. Let her set the pace. I nodded. But in my mind, something was already forming. Because there was something that didn't quite fit. You said you spoke with the grandparents. I went back. Yes. And they never showed concern? The counselor hesitated again. But this time it was different. More uncomfortable. Not exactly. There it was. What does that mean? Pause. It means that they seem to know more than they say. The air in the room shifted. Literally. How so? In some meetings, they anticipated comments, as if they already knew what was going to be brought up, and they responded before the concern was even expressed. That wasn't normal. That wasn't defensiveness. That was preparation. As if they already know what's happening? I asked. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't need to. Her silence was enough. That's when everything clicked at once. It wasn't ignorance. It wasn't neglect. It was awareness and choice. The grandparents knew. They knew something was wrong. They knew how Valentina reacted. They knew how to justify it. And still, they did nothing. Or worse, they were part of it. A knot tightened in my chest. Because that changed everything. We weren't talking about a difficult environment. We were talking about something sustained, allowed, normalized inside that house. I need to talk to her, I said. This time not as a suggestion, as a decision. The counselor nodded slowly. Do it right, because if trust breaks, she won't open up again. I knew. And that was the most delicate part of all. Because Valentina wasn't a child who didn't want to talk. She was a child who had learned that speaking could make things worse, and changing that isn't done with questions. It's done with patience. That same afternoon, when Sophia got home, I told her something simple. If Valentina comes over today, I want you to invite her to watch a movie. Sophia looked at me strangely. Why? I just want you both to be comfortable. She didn't ask anything else. And luckily, Valentina did come. Like nothing. Like always. But I didn't see her the same way anymore. She wasn't just my daughter's friend. She was a child trapped in something she didn't fully understand, but that was clearly breaking her from the inside. That afternoon, I didn't ask questions. I didn't bring anything up. I just stayed, present, attentive, waiting for the moment, because I knew it would come, sooner or later. And when it did, I had to be ready. It wasn't that afternoon, nor the next. And at first, that drove me a little crazy. Because when you know something is wrong, all you want is to get to the bottom of it as quickly as possible. But with Valentina, it didn't work like that. Everything had to be slow, natural. As if nothing were happening. Over the next few days, I kept things the same. No direct questions. No pressure. Just presence. Sometimes I sat with them to watch a show. Or I'd pass through the living room and make casual comments. Small interactions. Without invading. Without forcing anything. And little by little, something started to change. Valentina began staying a bit longer. Not much. But enough to notice. She no longer checked the time every 5 minutes. She didn't seem as tense all the time. And that confirmed something important. The problem wasn't here. It was there. At her house. One Thursday afternoon, Sophia had homework, so they went into her room. I was in the kitchen, organizing a few things, when Valentina came out alone. That wasn't common. She stood at the entrance to the kitchen, like she was hesitating. Do you need something? I asked. She shook her head. Silence. She stepped a little closer. Can I have some water? Of course. I poured her a glass. She held it with both hands. Didn't drink right away. Just held it. Your house is quiet, she said. The sentence was simple. But the way she said it wasn't. It didn't sound like a comment. It sounded like an observation, like a comparison. I'm glad you like it, I replied. She nodded, took a small sip, and then, silence again. The kind of silence you know is full of something, but you don't know what. I didn't speak. I didn't interrupt. I just waited. And then, she said it. At my house, you're not allowed to make noise. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't venting. It was a fact. Said like someone describing a rule. Like saying you stop at red lights. I felt something inside me tighten, but I stayed calm. Oh really? She nodded. If you make noise, they get mad. Pause. Who? I asked. Carefully. My grandparents. Silence. She took another sip of water. What kind of noise? I asked. I don't know, laughing loudly, walking too hard, closing doors. She spoke softly, as if she were still in that environment, as if the walls could hear her. And what happens if you make noise? That's where she hesitated. For the first time since she started talking, she looked toward the doorway, as if making sure no one was listening. They get upset. That word. They get upset. It was too soft for what she was conveying. And what do they do when they get upset? Silence. Long, heavy. And for a moment I thought she would shut down, that I had gone too far. But she didn't. She took a deep breath, and spoke. They punish me. Again, that word wasn't enough. How? I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. Valentina looked down, turned the glass slowly in her hands, and then she said something that made me go completely still. They make me stand. Stand? She nodded. Against the wall. Silence. My mind tried to process it, but something didn't fit. For how long? She looked up, and for the first time, I saw something different. Not fear. Exhaustion. Until they say, the air grew heavy. The kind that's hard to breathe. An hour? 2? I tried. She shook her head. More. How much more? Pause. And then she said it. One time it was almost 5 hours. It hit me in the chest. Literally. Because that was no longer discipline. That was something else. 5 hours, standing? She nodded. Without moving. Without sitting. Without talking. Without anything. If I moved, it started over. That sentence changed everything. Because it wasn't punishment anymore. It was extreme control. It was submission. It was something much more serious. I kept my composure as best I could. Does that happen often? She shrugged. Depends. On what? On whether I mess up. Silence. And what counts as messing up? Another pause. Longer. Harder. Anything. That's when a mix of emotions hit me all at once. Anger. Sadness. Helplessness. Because that answer said everything. There were no clear rules. No limits. No logic. Just control. Arbitrary. Constant. Do your grandparents know that hurts you? I asked. Without thinking much. She looked up, and shook her head. They don't care. The way she said it, wasn't angry, wasn't sad. It was flat, like a conclusion she had reached a long time ago, and that's when I understood something even harder. This wasn't new. It wasn't recent. Valentina had been living like this for a while, adapting, learning, surviving. Have you told anyone else about this? I asked. She hesitated. At school, sometimes. And what happens? They talk to them. Silence. And then, it gets worse. There it was. The reason she didn't speak. The reason she measured every word. The reason she said, if they find out, it's going to be worse for me. It wasn't a guess. It was experience. It had already happened. And that left me cold. Because it meant that any wrong move could hurt her more. Thank you for trusting me, I said. Softly. Without dramatizing it. She didn't respond. But she gave a small nod. Took another sip of water. And then said something I didn't expect. But you can't say anything. There it was. The condition. The barrier. If they know, it's going to be worse for me. Silence. That same sentence again, but now, with context. Now I knew exactly what she meant, and that put me in an impossible position, because I knew I couldn't stay silent, but I also couldn't betray her trust, and if I did it wrong, the consequences wouldn't fall on me, they would fall on her. That night, I didn't sleep, because for the first time, I wasn't just suspecting, I wasn't just reading signs, I knew, and what I knew was far more serious than I had imagined, but I also knew something else. This was no longer a situation that could be handled with just good intentions. This needed something bigger, more serious, more official, and I had to do it right, because one bad decision could make everything worse, but doing nothing was no longer an option. That night wasn't a night, it was a battle. Every option I considered came with a consequence, and in all of them, the one who could end up worse off was Valentina. I could stay silent, but that meant leaving her there, knowing what was happening, knowing she would go back to that house, those rules, those punishments. No. That wasn't an option. I could confront the grandparents, but after what I had seen, I knew it wouldn't help. People like that don't respond to logic, they respond to control, and if they feel questioned, they tighten it. More rules, more punishment, more silence. That also wasn't it. I could talk to the school again, but I already knew the limit. Without clear evidence, it all stayed as monitoring, and Valentina had already told me what happened when things stayed there. It gets worse. That didn't work either. So there was only one path left. The hardest one, the most serious one, the one you can't undo, calling Child Protective Services. Just thinking about it, felt like pressure closing in on my chest, because once you enter that system, everything changes. For her environment, for everything. But then I remembered something. 5 hours standing, without moving, resetting the time if she moved. That isn't discipline, that is abuse. And in that moment, I stopped doubting. The next day, I waited until Sophia left for school. I sat down, breathed, and called. I won't lie, my voice trembled at first, but as I spoke, it steadied. I told everything. From the beginning, every detail, every behavior, every sentence. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The person on the other end didn't interrupt much. They just asked questions. Clear, direct. Does the child show constant fear? Yes. Are there prolonged punishments? Yes. Is there excessive behavioral control? Yes. Each yes was another step forward. And at the end of the call, there was a brief silence. Then the sentence I knew was coming. We're opening a case. I didn't feel relief right away. I felt, wait, because now there was no going back. That same day, I made another decision. To talk to Valentina. Not to tell her everything, but to prepare her. When she came over that afternoon, everything looked normal, but I couldn't act the same anymore. I called her into the kitchen. Same as before. Same place. Same setting. Is Sophia here? She asked. She's in her room. Pause. I wanted to talk to you for a moment. She tensed. I saw it immediately, but she didn't leave. She stayed. Did I do something wrong? She asked. That question hit something inside me, because it was automatic. Her first assumption. No, I said quickly. Not at all. Silence. I took a breath. I had to do this right. I'm not going to tell your grandparents. I saw her shoulders relax slightly, but not fully, not directly, I added. And the tension came back. But I am going to get help. The word hung in the air. Help. She didn't respond. She just looked at me, and in that look, there was fear. A lot of it. Why? She asked. Not in anger. In worry. Because what you told me isn't okay. Pause. And it shouldn't be happening to you. Silence. But if they find out, she said. There it was again. That fear. That consequence. I know, I replied. And that's why I have to do it the right way. I stepped a little closer. Not invading. There are people who help in these situations. People who know how to do it without making things worse. I wasn't 100% sure of that, but I needed her to believe it. Because otherwise, she wouldn't trust me. Really? She asked. There it was. A small crack. A small opening. Yes. Silence. What if it goes wrong? That question, that wasn't a child's question. It was someone who had already lived consequences. Then we fix it, I said. Not as an empty promise. As intent. She didn't answer right away. She thought. Processed. And then she said something I didn't expect. Okay. It was quiet. But clear. But, I don't want to go back there if they find out. That sentence confirmed everything. This wasn't discomfort. This wasn't exaggeration. It was real fear. Of her own home. We're going to try to make sure that doesn't happen, I told her. And even though I didn't have full control, I was going to do everything I could. That afternoon felt strange. Everything looked normal on the surface. Laughter. A show. Conversations. But underneath, everything had changed. 2 days later, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't an ordinary visit. 2 people. ID badges in hand. Serious. Professional. Child Protective Services. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. When I opened the door and saw them, I knew that everything that had happened up to that point had only been the beginning. They introduced themselves. Calm. Professional. No drama. But with that kind of seriousness that makes it clear this is no longer something small. We're here about the case of Valentina. I nodded. I let them in. My heart was racing, but on the outside I stayed composed. Sophia was in her room. Valentina too. They didn't know anything about what was about to happen. The social workers asked me a few more questions. Details. Confirmations. Nothing new, but necessary. And then, they said what I was already expecting. We're going to speak with the grandparents. That's when I felt that nod again. Because that was the critical moment. The point where everything could go well, or get worse. And Valentina? I asked. For now, we want to assess the situation directly. I nodded. But I didn't feel calm. Not at all. That afternoon was long. Heavy. As if time itself had stretched. Valentina went home like always. Not knowing that, this time, it wouldn't be the same. That night I barely slept. Again. Thinking about everything that could happen. All the variables. All the scenarios. But reality went beyond everything I had imagined. The next day, I got the call. It was one of the social workers. His tone was different. More serious than usual. We need to speak with you. That is never a good sign. I went to the office they told me to go to. I sat down. And then, they told me. When they arrived at the grandparents' house, they weren't surprised. That was the first thing. No confusion. No questions. No, what's going on? It was calm. Too calm. As if they already knew. As if they were expecting it. That matched what the counselor had said. They anticipate everything. But what came next was what truly changed everything. During the initial inspection, they found something. It wasn't a bruise. It wasn't a visible injury. It was worse. In one of the rooms, there was a wall. Empty. No pictures. No decorations. Nothing. Just marks. Thin lines. Repeated. At different heights. as if someone had been measuring something, over and over again, for a long time. When they asked what it was, the grandparents said something I still struggle to process. It's to teach discipline, just like that. No shame, no hesitation, no attempt to hide it. Discipline. But that wasn't all. There was more, much more. A notebook, kept in a drawer, not hidden, just stored, and inside, records, days, hours, mistakes, punishments, everything written down, like a system, like a method. This wasn't outbursts. It wasn't anger in the moment. It was something structured, planned, sustained. For years, Valentina wasn't being punished. She was being controlled, conditioned, trained, like she was an experiment, like she was less than a child. That's when I understood the grandparents' calm. They didn't think they were doing anything wrong. They believed they were doing the right thing. That was the most disturbing part. Because when someone doesn't see the harm they cause, there is no limit, no restraint, no guilt, only continuation. The intervention was immediate. No warnings, no second chances. Valentina was removed from the house that same day. When they told me that, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. It wasn't joy. Not exactly. It was relief, but a heavy kind. The kind that comes after a lot of fear. Days later, I saw her again. Not at my house. At a center. Under supervision. When she walked in, she didn't look the same. She wasn't scared, but she wasn't relaxed either. It was like she didn't know how to exist. Like she had lost the map. She looked at me, and for a second, she was herself again. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. I smiled. She did too. Small, but real. We sat down. We talked about simple things. School, a show, Sophia. Nothing deep, nothing heavy. But at one point, she asked a question. Just one. Do I still have to stand against the wall? I felt a lump in my throat, but I stayed calm. No silence. No more. She nodded. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just nodded, like someone who still couldn't fully believe it. And that was the hardest part. Because for her, that had been normal. For so long, that even outside of it, she still doubted. Months later, things stabilized. Valentina was placed with other relatives. A different environment. Healthier. More human. It wasn't a magical change. It wasn't instant. There was therapy, adjustments, setbacks, progress, everything that comes with leaving something like that behind. But little by little, she started becoming a child again. Not perfect, not like before, but free. And one day, months later, something small happened, but important. We were at home, Sophia and her watching a movie, me in the kitchen, and suddenly, I heard laughter. Loud, unfiltered, without fear. I froze, listening, because it wasn't just laughter. It was a sign, proof, that something had truly changed. I peeked in, and there she was, Valentina, laughing, not looking at the door, not tensing up, not apologizing, just laughing. And in that moment, I understood something I will never forget. Sometimes, the most dangerous things are not the ones that make noise, it's the ones that become normal. Because when something bad becomes routine, it stops feeling urgent, stops feeling serious, until someone decides to look closer, and not ignore it. Because that was the difference. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I wasn't perfect. I just didn't ignore what I saw. And that was enough to change everything.